You said that women offended online should log off. You said, yes, we'll certainly let women onto the men's internet a few times a year, as long as you follow a few basic rules. You said, wait, let me finish. You said mass Muslim immigration must stop, or people will know real rape culture. Are we supposed to just soak that up and take it as one big joke?
Am I wrong about that?
Answer me. Are we supposed to just soak it up and take it as one big joke?
Right, Kathy Newman, I need to explain to you why you're part of the problem. You just quoted Milo as saying that Muslim refugees are bringing a rape culture, and your only response to that is to say, are we supposed to soak that up? Are we supposed to soak that up? You can't say that, you can't say that, and you haven't actually responded to him. What Milo is saying is something an awful lot of people believe. And because they believe it, they're afraid. And because they're afraid, it's very likely they could be driven to violence. Now, I might suggest you could have turned around to him and said, do you realise that rape is a lynchable offence in Islamic countries? Do you realise in Islamic countries that you can't speak to a woman unless you are related to her or married to her? That you can't even touch a woman in public, even if you are married to her? And in many cases, you can't even look at a woman until you're married to her. How is this in any way a rape culture? How about saying that? That might have been a better way of dealing with the question rather than just saying, are we supposed to soak that up? Are we supposed to soak that up? You can't say that. Because by doing that, you're escalating these people's fears. Because their threat narrative includes the idea that they can't talk about it. And you're escalating those fears by not letting them talk about it. You actually just become part of their narrative. For all of Milo's obnoxiousness, and Milo can be obnoxious, he is part of the solution because he is talking. And it's the fact that liberals like Kathy Newman don't respond. They put people like Milo in an echo ghetto. Whilst the liberals are in an echo chamber of their own making because they're not prepared to talk to anyone that they consider to be morally beneath them, other people like Milo are in an echo ghetto because the rest of the population aren't talking to them. So they're only talking to like-minded people. Exactly the same as those in the echo chamber. Except, rather than being in an echo chamber of their own making, they're in an echo ghetto. They have been relegated to. The effect's the same. If you're only hearing bouncing back your own beliefs, then you're not having your beliefs challenged, are you? The culture of political correctness has treated fear much in the same way as a teenager might treat acne by putting foundation makeup on the top. I'm wondering why the acne just gets worse. The acne's getting worse because it can't breathe. Because covering it up doesn't solve the problem. Covering it up just makes the infection worse. Milo is expressing a widely held fear, but he is expressing it. Now, unaired fears fester into hatred. Truth and rationality are the remedial solutions to fear, not silence. Which brings us back to the first quotation from Milo that you ask, are we supposed to just soak this up? And I'm saying, no, you should bloody engage with, is there was a time when we made damn sure that women weren't offended, and the way we did that was by, whenever we had a political discussion about anything that could be a little bit heated, we sent women to the drawing room. And it was progress that women came out of the drawing room, but the idea was that this was because women could engage in political discussion too, without getting offended. It wasn't so that we could make the whole world into a drawing room. Whilst the alt-right are fearful of a rape culture that's over there that we are importing, the feminists are worried about a rape culture that's over here that we already have. And whilst the alt-right are worried about a Sharia law that we're importing, I personally am worried about a Sharia law we're creating here from fresh cloth of our own making. The response of someone like Thangam Debbonairre to the fears about Muslim refugees is to exploit it to push her own agenda of fears about men in her own country. Yes, she seems to be saying that he's going to give lessons in female equality to Muslims coming into the country, but if we read further down into what she's actually saying, she is saying that men and boys need to have sensitivity training regardless of where they come from. That is, all men need this education. Our indigenous population is not a haven of gender equality, and you could have a situation where boys who have settled, just arrived, or been born here, would all get the same information on how they should interact with women. If you remember, I was saying that actually the Muslim immigrants are coming from a culture in which you can't talk to a woman in public unless you're related to her. You can't touch a woman in public, even if you're married to her, and you can't look at a woman until you're married to her. In many cases, and the Muslim culture is one that is very, very, very fearful of rape, and as I say, it is a lynchable offence. So that's not a massive deal, because taking drugs is also a lynchable offence. A lot of things that are lynchable offences in places like Saudi Arabia. So we're talking about men that have come from a culture where you can't speak to a woman in public unless you're related to her, and you're going to give them lessons in why they shouldn't speak to a woman unless they're first spoken to, because that's our own homegrown Sharia law that people like Thangam Debbonairre would like to push, is one in which if a man speaks to a woman before he's spoken to, then he runs the risk of being treated like a hate criminal. The lessons that she would roll out to both Muslim immigrants and to people already living here would make us more like them, not make them more like us. If you want to look for where something akin to Sharia law is going to come in, you don't need to look to the Muslims. Look to what our own people are doing in Nottingham, when Nottingham police are now cracking down on unwanted or uninvited sexual advances, verbal assault, and uninvited physical or verbal contact or engagement. Uninvited verbal contact. In other words, don't speak unless you're spoken to. Whilst the alt-right are afraid of that rape culture over there, the feminists are afraid of this rape culture over here. And Thangam Debbonairre is exploiting their fears to push the agenda of her own fears in order to push a war on intimacy over here that is the very same as a war on intimacy that happened in Islam a long, long time ago. And as a result, we are going to wind up with a culture in which it's considered to be detrimental to a woman if a man looks at her, and disrespectful if a man speaks to a woman in public that he doesn't know.
Are we supposed to just soak that up and take it as one big joke? Am I wrong about that?
Am I wrong about that?
Answer me. Are we supposed to just soak it up and take it as one big joke?
Really productive conversation there, Kathy.
You're supposed to treat it as it's intended and not wrench it from context. You know perfectly well that it is a provocation designed to make people think and perhaps to make them laugh.
The guy who's behind all this provocation, the guy who hired you and turned you into a star, as you put it, is now chief strategist in the White House. What does it mean that someone who delighted in offending people, who delighted in having a laugh at Muslims and women, is now at the centre of power?
Having a laugh? I don't think it's having a laugh at Muslims, is it? They're going to come over here and rape our women. That's not having a laugh, that's a threat narrative. Like I say, take it seriously. It's far too big an issue to go, oh, they're making an offensive joke. He's not making an offensive joke, he's expressing a fear. A fear that could escalate violence. I don't think you should be taking it as a joke. I mean, you should take it seriously and not saying you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that, because that isn't taking it seriously.
Like in offending people, I think the grievance brigade, victimhood, you know, the idea that hurt feelings are some kind of special currency, I think that needs to come to an end, and America agrees.
What does that say about you? What does that say about the guy who's now the chief strategist? Should Steve Bannon care that people are offended?
No, because America has been ruled for 30 years by people who are too worried about what other people feel, not what other people think, and too worried about feelings versus facts. For decades, America has been run by the grievance brigade, by social justice warriors, hand-wringers, feminists, Black Lives Matter, all these groups that are preoccupied with feelings first and facts later. They spread conspiracy theories and propaganda about the wage gap, campus rape culture. This stuff isn't real.
Well, he's right, they do. They do spread conspiracy theories and propaganda, false statistics, and misinformation. I can't say that Milo is completely innocent of that crime himself. But at least he's beginning debates, which means that we can talk about it. Milo's conspiracy theories and threat narratives are actually less threatening than the feminists' conspiracy theories and threat narratives because he can be engaged with. He isn't no platforming those that disagree with him.
What does it say about you, though? What does it say about Steve Bannon, who's now chief strategist, that you don't care about offending disabled people, ethnic minorities, women? You don't care about that.
I don't care about offence-taking. I care about facts. I don't care about your feelings.
But I thought you believed in a post-fact universe.
You see how Kathy Newman's part of the problem there? Because the only problem she's identified is that people like Milo and Bannon are offensive. That's the only thing she's worried about. That's the only thing about them that she finds worrying, is they're offensive. I thought I'd finished, and then looking for a link for that clip, I found the rest of it, and I found a bit more that I want to comment on, because having finished with Milo, Kathy then goes on to speak to a liberal journalist from America, and I want to comment on her.
I'm joined now from New York by Varsha Sharma, who's the managing editor of the Now This news organisation. Varsha Sharma, have Liberals got the right idea about how to take the alt-right on?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of how liberals and progressives are going to take on the Trump presidency. I think that there's a lot of reckoning to be done in terms of how the media in the U.S. especially covered this campaign, given the results. But
only given the results. It took Trump to get the bloody presidency for you to realise you were doing things wrong. I mean, actually, if that's what it takes, good. Good. Bring on the end of the world. That's what we need. That's exactly what we need. This is the only thing that's going to knock some bloody sense into you.
I just want to point out that I think the new alt-right argument, as exemplified by Milo there, is basically toss all the names that you're thrown at and just say, oh, it's actually the other side that's doing them, without actually answering for any of the many headlines that you mentioned.
As I pointed out, she wouldn't answer for any of the headlines that she mentioned. She wasn't prepared to discuss any of the headlines. She just said, do you think that's acceptable? Do you think that's acceptable? No. Do you think that's accurate? Why are we not asking that? Why are we not saying, do you think that's accurate?
He says it's all a big joke, though. It's all a big wind-up, and that, you know, liberal people are falling into this trap of getting wound up by them.
I mean, I have to say it's not about liberals getting wound up, but it's about liberals calling out racism, sexism, misogyny, fear of the other when they see it.
All of which are completely subjective. Racism, sexism, misogyny, even fear of the other. It's all subjective unless you can back it up with arguments. You're not prepared to do that. You're just prepared to say, stop that, that's naughty. Stop that, that's naughty. Explain how it's misogyny. Beyond that, explain why it is wrong. Explain why it is factually wrong. Don't just say that falls into this particular thought crime. Say why that idea is factually wrong. And then you might be actually engaging. Maybe you have to engage your own brain and say, is it factually wrong? And we're crying people to be more intelligent than they are, but I think that's the problem. I think your brains have all turned floppy from lack of exercise.
So to Milo, he may think that what Brietbart is doing is satire, but you know, a couple of weeks after 9 black people were gunned down in a church here in Charleston, South Carolina, Brietbart, under Steve Bannon's leadership, published an article saying, "This is why you should raise the Confederate flag high and proud." So that's not satire. That's actually something that is a real problem in America when you're encouraging sort of white supremacist ideas when black people are being shot.
Of course, I had to check this out. Did Brietbart really do that? Did they really go, hey, yeah, for the shooters of the black people, yeah, we're really in favour of that? Is that what they actually did? Did they do that? No. Should we have a look at that article? Hoist it high and proud, the Confederate flag proclaims a glorious heritage. So, yeah, they did produce an article saying, hoist it high and proud, regarding the Confederate flag, straight after shooting the black people. The night they hauled old Dixie down, in your dreams, Barack, and that goes for you too, Bill and Hillary, and all the other beltway liberal control freaks. The American left is in a feeding frenzy, cynically exploiting the tragic murders of 9 black worshippers in a Charleston church to promote its agenda of cultural genocide against conservatism, tradition, and the South. So not, in fact, supporting the shooting of blacks or inciting more shootings of blacks, inciting and raising a flag. Now, we all have a debate about whether the Confederate flag is offensive or not, then have that debate. And why it's offensive. Yeah, you could argue it's offensive because it's got historical associations with slavery. If you want to make that argument, make that argument. But don't claim that an article which is actually saying leave our flag alone and don't exploit a murder of blacks that by Breitbart's own words is considered tragic, to push that agenda of getting rid of the flag. That's what it was saying. I don't know if we could drill any deeper into that article. There probably are things in that article that people would find offensive. But that's beside the point. You've been misrepresenting it. You're misrepresenting it to make it look like they were inciting race hatred, which they weren't.
I mean, it has to be said, though, that your news organisation didn't reach the people who voted for Trump, and Trump carries on tweeting and reaching those people directly. What do you do about that?
That's true, and I think that we're having an honest conversation in our newsroom and with other newsrooms in America where we talk about how we break outside of that social media echo chamber. Part of the problem is we don't have full control of how Facebook delivers our content, but we're trying to make sure that we're doing everything in our editorial power to reach out to broader audiences as well.
We neither don't have full control to make sure that people read them. No, people have got to trust you. They've got to think that you're going to be honest with them, and they know you're not going to be honest with them. And you just demonstrated that you haven't learned anything. You just misrepresented an article about whether or not the Confederate flag should be flown or not, and misrepresented it as an article inciting race hatred, which it clearly wasn't, because in the very first paragraph it identified the murder of black people as tragic. So you lie. You're lying about them still. You're still lying about them, and you're wondering why people don't want to read you. They don't want to read you because whether or not you have honest discussions in your office, I don't know how honest your discussions in the office are, you're not having honest discussions with the public, are you?
Do you think that Trump's new chief strategist, Steve Bannon, the Breitbart chairman, is the bogeyman that he's been painted as? I mean, Jewish employees have been lining up to defend him against allegations of anti-Semitism for a start.
Right, and I understand that their argument is because he hires Jews, he can't possibly be an anti-Semite, but...
Crazy argument. Yeah, he could be an anti-Semite, couldn't he? He could have them chained up and feed them gruel. Lock them in, not let them out. Not let them out until the story's done. I want that article published. You Jewish bastards.
You also have to look at the facts, despite what Milo and others say. And the facts are that in court under testimony, his wife said that Bannon didn't want his children going to school with Jews, that he didn't like seeing books about Hanukkah in the school library. And regardless of whether or not, you know, Bannon has personal feelings toward Jewish people, the more important point of discussion is, are they supporting policies that exclude these people? Are they playing into anti-Semitic tropes in their advertisements and their talks of a global conspiracy?
Hi, global conspiracy is an anti-Semitic trope, I suppose, if it's a Jewish global conspiracy, but talks of a global conspiracy in general isn't anti-Semitic, is it? It's only anti-Semitic if you say that this global conspiracy is to the benefit of Jews and is all orchestrated by Jews. That would be anti-Semitic. But the actual trope of saying there are global conspiracies, there may well be global conspiracies that may have nothing to do with being Jewish, or certainly that not all Jews are involved in, and that not all Jews benefit from. Similarly, the left have been attacked by the neoliberals as well, because they make allegations about bankers in general, and that's been considered to be sort of an anti-Semitic trope. Well, they actually haven't said Jewish bankers, they've just said bankers. Yeah, bankers do benefit from the economy as it is. Some of them may be Jewish, and some of them won't be. And saying it's the bankers doesn't mean that you're saying it's the Jews. Just because it's a anti-Semitic trope. If you're not including Jewish as part of that trope, then it ceases to be anti-Semitic. Mind you, then again, if your investors happen to be bankers, then accusing anyone that says the bankers are a problem of being anti-Semite is a good way of silencing them, isn't it? Put aside the fact that you're actually promoting anti-Semitism by making that exact connection that an anti-Semite would make. That the bankers are Jews, and that any global conspiracy must be a Jewish one.
And are they basically making Brietbart a home for some of these people who believe these things?
Well, Steve Bannon did send his kids to that school, and he denies all allegations of anti-Semitism. But, I mean, how do you, in a news organisation, deal with what the likes of Milo call this post-truth universe? When there's all these fake news stories out there, what do you do?
It's difficult, but I think that what journalists have to remember is we are there to inform audiences. So we have, you know, despite whatever the American public may be feeling or the alt-right may be feeling, we do have an obligation to tell the truth and to back up our arguments with facts.
I need an action replay here.
And the facts are that in court under testimony, his wife said that Bannon didn't want his children going to school with Jews.
Steve Bannon did send his kids to that school.
And the facts are that in court under testimony, his wife said that Bannon didn't want his children going to school with Jews.
Steve Bannon did send his kids to that school.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so she hadn't said anything unfactual. She had said that his wife had said that. So they just reported it. His wife said it, so it must be true. It wasn't actually true, but you reported it anyway, because his wife said it. And using his wife's testimony as the allegation of why this man's anti-Semitic. So let's go back to what you were saying about facts.
So I think that, you know, we need to maybe lessen some of our tones in terms of trying to call out other people, but just calling them out with the facts. So one of the videos that we did at Now This was, okay, here's Steve Bannon in his own words. We're not telling you how to feel about him. We're presenting things that he said over the years about women, even about the current Republican Party, about how he wants to completely tear down the establishment in America.
Doesn't sound very conservative, does it? When he says tear down the establishment in America. Since when has tearing down the establishment been something that the left go, oh my God, so he's trying to tear down the establishment? What the fuck happened? What happened to us? Tearing down the establishment, you used to love that. That was great. Let's tear down the establishment. Shit, let's replace it with something else. But that aside, in some ways, I think, you know, yeah, using facts to call somebody out rather than just calling them a racist or a sexist or a misogynist might be an improvement. But then again, we know that you can be dishonest that way as well, because we know there's a little thing called quote mining, where you can take somebody's quote out of context and make it sound like they're a terrible person because you haven't actually introduced the sentences before and after the quote to indicate what was actually being said. I have to say, when it comes to this, that they're not the only ones to do that. The neoliberals aren't the only ones to do that. I've seen that same sort of thing happening on both sides. Sorry, fucking idiot. What am I talking about? Both sides. This is a problem. I've just fallen into the trap. I've fallen into the trap that has been set by the narrative, the media narrative. There's no both sides. There's lots of sides. That's one of the problems. Is you get this sort of set meal politics. Is if you believe A, you got to believe B. You're gonna have to be in that group or that group. There's no in between. You can't treat the marketplace of ideas like a smorgasbord where we pick and choose and find things we like. No, we have to either go with that group of ideas over here or that group of ideas over there, and they can be never crossover. No crossover can happen between these two. They're completely mutually exclusive. And when I said both sides, I fell directly into the trap that's been set. What I should have said is by people of all ideological inclinations. I do think that we all have a responsibility to fact check and find out what context something was said in. When we see a quote in a newspaper saying, this person said this thing, and think, oh, what a terrible person that person must be. I think we all have a duty to actually chase it back to the source and say, what did they actually say? And why did they say it? And what were they saying it in response to? Before we have a knee-jerk reaction. Be skeptical and always question what's been said to us. And the media should be aware that we're going to do that. Because we are going to do that. And when we find out they're lying to us, we're not going to trust them. So, I am done now. Bear in mind, other opinions are available. This is just one blind man reporting on the nature of elephants. Cheerio. They're going to come over here and rape our women. Knock some bloody sense into you. Hey, yeah, for the shooters of the black people, yeah, we're really in favour of that. You Jewish bastards. Tear down the establishment. Shit, let's replace it with something else. I do think that we all have a responsibility to fact check and find out what context something was said in. When we see a quote in a newspaper saying, this person said this thing, and think, oh, what a terrible person that person must be. I think we all have a duty to actually chase it back to the source and say, what did they actually say? And why did they say it? And what were they saying it in response to?